Ever notice how some women seem to get lighter with age? Not just in what they carry, but in how they move through life, like they've peeled off layers the rest of us are still dragging. It's not magic. And it's not about being rich. It's about clarity. They don't hold on to things that don't honor who they are now. Not the half-broken trinkets. Not the loud accessories that never felt right. Not the outdated rules that told them they had to keep everything just in case. These women have learned the quiet power of letting go. And the result? They walk into their homes and feel peace. They open their closets and feel aligned. They plan their days, and finally, it feels like their life. If any part of that sounds like the life you've been craving, you're not alone. Tap like if you've ever felt weighed down by your own things. And go ahead and subscribe, because what we're about to uncover aren't just tips for cleaning out a drawer. They're decisions that might just shift the way you move through the next chapter of your life. Let's begin. Claire is 68. She lives alone now in a tidy cottage just outside Asheville, North Carolina. Not the kind of place you'd see in a magazine, but the kind that smells faintly of cinnamon tea, has soft morning light in every room, and carries a quiet energy that makes guests exhale the moment they step in. But it didn't always feel like this. A few years ago, Claire's home was full. Not messy, just full. Every shelf held something meaningful. Every drawer had a backup. Her closet still housed conference name tags from her teaching days. And in the garage? A half-used fondue set from the 90s she was sure she'd use again. Her days were just as packed. She hosted the book club she no longer enjoyed, baked for every neighborhood potluck, and spent hours worrying about how to please everyone except herself. Then something small happened. She dropped a ceramic mug she'd owned for over 30 years. It shattered on the kitchen floor. As she swept it up, she realized she didn't feel sad. She felt free. Not because she disliked the mug, but because its weight, its have to, was finally gone. That moment stayed with her. Claire began to ask herself a question she'd never dared before. If this disappeared tomorrow, would I truly miss it, or just feel guilty? She looked around and saw things that had once been treasures, but were now just obligations in physical form. That scarf from a trip she barely remembers. The dusty wine glasses waiting for guests who never came. The pile of old greeting cards she hadn't read in a decade but felt wrong tossing. It wasn't about becoming a minimalist. It was about creating space she could finally breathe in. She realized she'd filled her home the same way she'd filled her time, with somedays and shoulds. Now, Claire keeps only what adds real value. A small shelf of books she rereads every winter. 3 scarves that make her feel like herself. And a schedule that leaves room for quiet walks and bold ideas. She didn't declutter because it was trendy. She did it because she was tired of hearing everything else louder than her own voice. And for the first time in years, Claire doesn't just exist in her space, she feels alive in it. That's where her story begins. Item 1. Souvenirs that no longer reflect you. Claire once kept a large floral box tucked neatly under her guest room bed. Inside were dozens of keepsakes collected over the years, tiny cruise ship anchors, faded postcards with illegible messages, keychains from airport gift shops, menus from restaurants she barely remembered. They were all carefully arranged, wrapped in tissue, as if waiting for someone to come along and ask about them. But no one ever did. And even when she occasionally pulled out the box, the feeling wasn't joy, it was obligation. Claire told herself these items held memories, but when she really looked at them, the truth was clearer, they held pressure. Pressure to remember a version of herself that no longer existed. Pressure to prove that her life had been adventurous, colorful, full. One day, as she dusted the box off yet again, Claire picked up a plastic dolphin with a chipped flipper. She tried to recall where it came from. Bahamas? Bermuda? It didn't matter. What struck her instead was how hollow it felt in her hand. Not because of its weight, but because of what it didn't mean anymore. She asked herself a new question. If I saw this in a store today, would I buy it again? The answer was no. And with that clarity, she began letting go. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But gently. She chose just a few to keep. Ones tied to real stories, real people, real warmth. The rest? She released with gratitude. That one small act created a ripple effect. The guest room felt lighter. The bed didn't groan under the weight of used to be. And Claire? She started sleeping better, because her home no longer whispered to her from underneath the furniture. Souvenirs can be beautiful, but they're not sacred by default. What makes something worth keeping isn't its price or how long you've owned it. It's whether it still reflects you. And after 60, you're allowed to change what you looks like. In fact, it's necessary. Do you have a drawer, a box, or a shelf of things that once meant something, but now just sit there making you feel stuck? Tell us below. No judgment, only honesty. Let this be your permission slip to stop curating a museum of your past and start designing a space for your present. Item 2. Bargain jewelry and scarves you never liked. Claire had a habit, one that felt innocent for years. Every time she passed the clearance rack at her local department store, she'd grab a brooch, a scarf, or a pair of earrings simply because they were marked down. 2 for 1. Extra 60% off. Why not? They ended up in a decorative box on her dresser, some still with the tags attached. Scarves in colors that didn't flatter her. Brooches that felt more costume than class. Chunky beads she thought might dress up a plain top someday. But someday never came. She told herself they were good deals, but deep down, Claire knew what they really were: impulse purchases fueled by habit, boredom, and that tiny whisper we've all heard, "If I don't grab it now, I'll regret it." The regret came anyway. Not because of the money, but because of the space they took up in her life. One afternoon, while looking for a necklace she actually wore, Claire opened the box and paused. It was overflowing with things she never reached for. Not once. Some she didn't even like when she bought them, but couldn't resist the price. Others were gifts she felt too guilty to part with. She held up a wide silk scarf in a mustard floral pattern, one she had never worn and knew she never would. That's when the thought struck her. If I wouldn't wear this to dinner with someone I care about, why am I storing it like treasure? The truth? She wasn't storing it. She was hoarding an image of who she thought she should be. Someone trendier, bolder, maybe flashier. But Claire wasn't that woman, and never wanted to be. She wasn't cheap. She was choosing. She decided right then, no more just-in-case accessories. No more drawer full of guilt and glitter. She donated most of it to a local shelter that offered women free clothing and accessories for job interviews. Suddenly, those unused pieces had a purpose far beyond sitting untouched for years. Your style after 60 doesn't need to be loud. It needs to be true. Still keeping a necklace that never felt like you? Still holding onto a scarf because maybe someday you'll figure out how to wear it? Drop a comment below if this one hit close to home. Let this be your sign that elegance starts when you stop collecting and start curating. Item 3. Makeup and perfume that belonged to another era. Claire's vanity was like a time capsule, and not in a good way. Lipsticks in square silver tubes she hadn't touched since the late 80s. Foundation bottles 3 shades too light. A drawer of clumpy mascaras and broken compacts. And then there were the perfumes, some in beautiful glass bottles, others nearly empty but still holding onto names that whispered of old flings, office parties, and anniversaries long past. She kept them all because they reminded her of who she had been. A deep red lipstick she wore when she taught evening classes. A powdery floral perfume gifted by someone she no longer spoke to. A shimmer eyeshadow she bought for a wedding but never wore again. The collection told stories, yes, but stories Claire no longer wanted replaying every morning. Each item carried an echo. Some were sweet. Others felt like dust. One quiet morning, she looked in the mirror and didn't see herself. Not her now self, anyway. She saw layers, colors, scents, and products that were chosen for past moments, past faces, past feelings. And that's when she made the decision. She cleared it all. Not in anger. Not in regret. But in full acknowledgement that she had evolved. That her face deserved products that celebrated her current softness, strength, and wisdom, not try to repaint her into who she once was. She kept just a few things: a gentle rose lipstick that matched her tone, a nourishing cream she loved the feel of, and a warm scent that made her feel grounded every time she wore it. This wasn't a beauty upgrade, it was an emotional one. Claire stopped wearing colors out of habit and started choosing what made her feel whole. She didn't ask if it made her look younger. She asked if it made her feel like herself. There's something freeing about standing at your vanity and seeing only what you actually use. Products that belong to the woman you are now, not the one you used to be, or the one you thought you had to become. If your vanity still holds relics from old decades or old versions of yourself, it might be time. Not just to toss what's expired, but to release what no longer represents you. The mirror doesn't need to show who you were. It deserves to reflect who you've become. Item 4. Books that no longer speak to you. Claire's bookshelf stretched from wall to wall in her small study. A lifetime of titles stared back at her, some with cracked spines, others still glossy and untouched. At first glance, it looked impressive. Guests would sometimes comment, "Wow, you've read all of these." She'd smile politely and change the subject. Because the truth was harder to admit, many of those books she hadn't read. And many of the ones she had read didn't mean anything to her anymore. Some were gifts, well-meaning but misaligned. Some were titles she bought during phases when she wanted to be someone she wasn't. Others she picked up hoping they'd fix something. A few she kept out of guilt, simply because she'd once paid full price. One afternoon, while dusting the third shelf for the second time that month, Claire paused. She pulled out a heavy hardcover she remembered buying nearly 20 years ago during a self-help craze. She had underlined the first chapter. The rest? Still pristine. She flipped through it. It felt dry, distant. It didn't move her. That's when the realization hit her: not all clutter is physical. Some of it is silent expectation. Those books weren't just taking up space on the shelf. They were whispering, "You should be reading more. You should want to finish this. You should be that person who enjoys this kind of thing." Claire closed the book and whispered back, "Not anymore." She went shelf by shelf. Not speedily. Not emotionally. Just honestly. She kept the ones that brought her comfort, the mystery series she rereads each winter, the poetry collection she turns to when she can't sleep, the memoir that helped her through grief. Everything else? Donated to the community library or passed on to friends who might actually enjoy them. In doing so, she didn't just make room on her shelves. She made room in her mind. No more guilt glancing at half-read novels. No more pressure to prove she was still intellectually sharp. No more pretending. Books are powerful, but only when they are speaking to you. Take a look at your own shelf. Are there books there that represent who you were trying to be? Or titles you kept because maybe someday you'd get around to them? Let them go. Make space for stories that feed your soul, not just your image. Your home should feel like a sanctuary, not a syllabus. Item 5. Obligations that drain, not nourish. Of all the things Claire let go of, this one took the longest. It wasn't in a drawer or closet. It was in her calendar. Her habits. The way she was always quick to say yes before asking herself if she even wanted to. For years, she was the dependable one. The one who baked the cookies for the church social, showed up early to fold the chairs, stayed late to clean the tablecloths. If there was a need, she filled it. If someone was overwhelmed, she took it on herself. She told herself it was kindness. But deep down, she had started to feel invisible in her own life. One Thursday morning, standing in her kitchen with a mixing bowl in hand and another meeting circled on her calendar, she paused mid-stir and whispered aloud, "Why am I still doing this?" Not angrily. Not dramatically. Just honestly. It wasn't that she didn't care about the people. She did. She always had. But somewhere along the line, her good intentions had become automatic reflexes, saying yes, showing up, overextending, until there wasn't anything left for her. That week, Claire did something she hadn't done in years. She cancelled. Not out of protest, but out of peace. She called the club president and politely stepped away. Declined the monthly lunch she had been secretly dreading for months. And then, she sat down at her desk, opened a notebook she hadn't touched in 10 years, and wrote the first few lines of the memoir she used to dream about. At first, she felt guilty. That old voice crept in, "Are you being selfish?" But then something beautiful happened. Nothing collapsed. No one was angry. Life went on. And in the quiet space she created, something returned, herself. Letting go of objects was easy compared to this. Letting go of the pressure to please, the need to be everywhere, the idea that saying no meant being less, that was the real transformation. Now, Claire says yes only when her heart leans forward. And no longer out of habit, or fear, or guilt. Just truth. So ask yourself, what have you been doing just to keep the peace? What routine feels like a weight you quietly carry? Maybe it's not the stuff that's crowding your life. Maybe it's the promises you keep making to everyone but yourself. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to step away from what drains you, so you can finally step into what was meant for you all along. Claire's home doesn't look empty. It looks intentional. Every corner now reflects a choice, not a leftover. The shelves aren't bare, but what remains actually means something. Her favorite candle. A framed photo of her grandchildren. A simple bowl that catches sunlight in the afternoon. There's no more drawer filled with tangled jewelry she never wore. No more guilt-laced souvenirs collecting dust under the bed. And the calendar? It's no longer a wall of commitments made out of obligation. It's a space with breathing room. Mornings feel different now. Slower, but not aimless. There's time to sip her tea without mentally checking off a dozen errands. There's space to walk from room to room and feel calm, not confronted by projects she meant to start, or piles of things she couldn't let go of. But the biggest change wasn't the stuff. It was the silence. Not the lonely kind. The quiet kind. The kind that comes when your home isn't shouting reminders of who you used to be. When your life finally stops echoing all the expectations you've been carrying since your 40s. That silence is what peace sounds like. And it didn't happen because Claire wanted a cleaner house. It happened because she wanted a clearer life. She didn't downsize. She upgraded. She didn't declutter to make space on her shelves. She did it to make space in her soul. If you're still holding on to something from item 1 or item 2, those cruise souvenirs, the bargain earrings you never loved, you're not alone. Most of us keep those things because we think letting go means erasing the past. But in truth, letting go often brings it into sharper, more loving focus. So, which one hit you hardest? Was it the box of souvenirs you haven't looked at in years? Or that drawer of accessories you kept just in case but never actually used? Tell us in the comments. Your story might help someone else take their first step. And if any part of Claire's journey reminded you of your own, tap like. Let it mark the start of your own shift. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next video? It's all about recognizing the one thing most people keep that quietly holds them back. It's time to stop managing things, and start choosing what really belongs.